everybody, and welcome to our session here on whether you like 70, 20, 10, 3, 33, but basically really it's about how to avoid making your learning a numbers game. So it's something that people are very easy. So my name is Sharon, and
hi, my name's Chaz. You probably can't hear me quite as well as Sharon because I'm not mic'd up.
But he doesn't need to be.
I'm a bit of a, well, you know, I'm loud. So if you can't hear me, please throw something at me, preferably a £20 note, and then we can move on. We can carry on with that.
Okay, so what I'd like to do to start with is get you to think about learning generally, and what you learn and how you learn. So I'd like you to turn to the person or couple of people next to you and just think about what is something that you've learned in the last 48 hours and how did you learn it? Okay, so it could be as simple as how to get here. It could be a fact about something you saw on telly, whatever. What's something that you've learned in the last 48 hours and how did you learn it? Okay, so just a couple of minutes in your 2s or 3s. Okay, so who wants to give me some examples, not necessarily of what you've learned, but of how you've learned something? So over the last 24, 48 hours, that's sort of a way that some of you have learned something? Now I know you've got something because you've all just been talking. So, trial and error. Okay, yeah, that is a big thing. I do it, I realise what works and what doesn't. And actually, if you go right back to when we're babies, that's how we learn to walk, isn't it? We don't watch a PowerPoint presentation. We take a few steps, we fall over, think, ouch, that hurts, so I'll try something different. So yeah, trial and error, definitely. How else have people learned things in the last 24 hours? Using technology. So was that sort of searching the internet, or yeah, okay, so using technology and digital sources. What else? How else have people learned? Talking to people, yeah. So just sort of finding out, well, hey, you've just learned what someone else just learned. That's one thing you've just learned recently. Okay, anything else over this side at all?
Practical, putting my phone together. And
bit of practical, so actually doing it, so actually sort of trying something out and learning it as you're doing that. Okay, any other last things that we haven't covered so far? Yeah?
Following other people.
Following other people, yeah, so actually seeing, and if you think about on-the-job learning, when you first start a job, quite often you learn mostly by seeing what someone else does, which could be good or not so good, depending on how well the person does it in the first place, but that's a whole nother story. So I think the starting point is absolutely, we all know that we learn in lots of different ways. And you know, in days of yore, we talked about the idea, we can't actually see that very well there, the fact that traditionally it was all about knowledge, it was all about classroom based. And these days we're recognising that actually we learn in a lot of different ways. And we probably learn a lot more when we want to learn. So not when actually someone's telling us we've got to learn, but when we want to learn, we'll find a way, whether it's speaking to someone or going on the internet or watching someone. So we go and find our own ways there. And what we've heard a lot of recently is something called 70, 20, 10. How many of you have heard of 70, 20, 10? Yeah? Okay. So we're going to do a little bit of a sort of a check and see where you are with this. So I'm going to ask you in a second to put your hands up. First of all, if you think 70, 20, 10 is amazing, it's revolutionising what we're doing, we love it. And then also put your hands up if you're like, well, I have not a clue what it is. But also, I've heard of it, but I've got a few concerns about what might happen if I do that in my organisation or how I might do it in my organisation. Okay? So firstly, who loves it, thinks it's the most amazing thing and couldn't do anything else? Okay? That's fairly conclusive, isn't it? Who hasn't heard much about it at all? Okay. Who's heard about it, but we've got maybe some concerns or not sure about how to do things? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the great debate. We thought we'd make it a little bit more interesting than just preaching to you about something. So Chaz and I have been having a bit of an argument over the last few weeks, haven't we, mate? So Chaz loves 70, 20, 10. He thinks it's the best thing ever. So he's going to tell you a little bit about 70, 20, 10. And then I'm going to disagree with him. And I'm going to introduce you to a different model which you might not have heard of, which is 333. Has anyone come across that one before? Okay. And then we'll kind of look about actually from that, how do we avoid making it all about the numbers? How do we avoid making it prescriptive? Like, oh, hang on, I've only got 25% of my informal learning. What else am I going to do with it? So we'll have a look at it from that point of view. But Chaz, would you like to start off by talking a little bit about what 70, 20, 10 is all about?
There was a study done, can everybody hear me by the way? Yeah? There was a study done where a number of people were asked, how have you learned best over the course of your career? And predominantly what they found was that 70-20-10 was the best way that people had learned. 70% being on the job, 20% being learning from other people, and 10% being formal learning, so in a classroom setting, or sitting watching a PowerPoint presentation or something like that. So with this research that's been done, 70-20-10 has been proven, I say, proven, to be the absolute best training model you will ever come across. It is better than sliced bread. It has been further popularised by the work of a guy called Charles Jennings, who's given us the framework, and he's given us lots of different ideas as to how we can actually implement 70-20-10 in our organisations. Has anybody ever heard of him? No? He's the guy that's popularised it. He's the guy that's given us all this stuff. And I think he is better than the sliced bread baker. He's the man. Are you all with me? Yeah. I like this.
Not for long, don't you worry.
Sharon's going to try and persuade you that 333 is a much better way of learning. I think that I've just told you everything you need to know that 70-20-10 is the best way.
Okay, I'm up for that challenge. Okay, do you know what group of people, when they originally came up with 70-20-10 and the studies that they're based on, do you know what group of people the studies were based on? It was based on senior business executives and leaders, so senior managers in organisations. And they weren't asked about what generally is training that you like. They said, over the course of your career, from starting to where you are now, where have you learned most? If you kind of think of it from that point of view, then actually, yeah, as leaders over the years, they would have learned a lot from actually what they've done and their experience. But how does that apply in your organisation to maybe a new customer service representative? Is what works for a senior leader over the course of their years going to really be appropriate to someone who doesn't know anything about your organisation, anything about your products? We just say, yeah, go and find out, see what you can do, ring a customer, see what happens. If it goes wrong, that's fine, because you'll learn by doing. Not quite sure that's going to really work in some of the roles. The other thing that this work that was done was actually done on a very small number of people. So it was less than 300 senior managers that were actually involved in the initial research. So in terms of what they call empirical evidence, there isn't very much around it to actually say that yes, definitely, this is going to, these not thousands and thousands of people, it's less than 1,000 people that were actually involved in the study, and it was only senior managers. So I propose that actually, whilst I do agree with the concept that we don't just learn in the classroom, I think we kind of all know that now, that actually 70-20-10 is just kind of a little bit too much, and I don't think it's totally been proven. So I've been doing some research to a guy called Dan Pontefract. And he's got a book called The Flat Army. The book overall is very much about that kind of how to get a much more collaborative, less control and command leadership model. But he talks about learning as part of this. And he talks about something called pervasive learning. So pervasive learning is basically that switch, as we kind of say actually in our fusion learning, from seeing training as an event to seeing learning as a collaborative, continuous and community-based mindset. So it's not just about this place, it's about all the different ways. It's about learning, not training. And the expression I really like is learning at the speed of need. I quite like that. Quite often in organisations, if you run regular training classes or have a training calendar, it's almost that we're doing what we call push learning. So we're pushing people to learn certain things because we think you need to know about time management or you need to know about customer service. Learning at the speed of need is about pull learning. It's about having that information available when people need it. So when people say, oh, actually, I need to find my way to the NEC, can I easily find directions? I need to know how to answer this customer query. Where can I go to find that out? And that might be from speaking to another person. It might be from looking at something digitally. It might be, I need to understand this product, so I need to go on a course and actually see what you do with it. And so his model is still the same. So it still has some formal learning. So when you are actually formally there, you have got someone with you, whether that is including virtual learning through e-learning, whether that is including face-to-face training, coaching, etc. So all of those things that are formalised processes. He does still have informal, and that's more where you're going and finding the information yourself. So you're looking on websites and blogs, quite a lot of digital stuff around that one, but not entirely. Some of us do still occasionally go to a library, not often, but you know, there's other ways of doing things. And then social, so anything that's involving someone else. And one of the big things we find is that collaboration is probably one of the core things of learning, so spending time with other people. Okay, and learning through whether that's the experts that the guy said at the beginning, actually watching people do things, asking them questions. Things like action learning sets is one of my personal favourites, where you learn together on a particular thing that you're working on. So I propose that 70-20-10 does not have sufficient evidence and is based on a very small group of people, whereas 3-33 takes the best of 70-20-10, but it makes it more accessible for people overall. Now, Chaz, would you like to come back on any of that before we get people to have a discussion and a vote about this, and then we look about how we avoid making it a numbers game, full stop?
So my big point there is Sharon talked way longer than I did.
That's part of the course.
That's just not part. I still think 70-20-10 is the thing that will get you to where you need to be. Sharon obviously disagrees. What do you think?
So, what I'd like you to do now is to get yourself in groups of about sort of 4 people, I think is enough for 4 or 5 people to have a decent conversation. And to take a minute to look at those 2 things that we've talked about. So first of all, 70-20-10, then 3-33, and then say, actually, do we prefer this model, or do we think neither of them is necessarily a cure-all answer? Is there something else that we're missing here? Okay, so take a couple of minutes in your 3s or 4s, or 5s even, to have a conversation about where are you. I'm going to ask you to vote afterwards, and your choice is 70-20-10, 3-33, or something else altogether. Okay, so just a couple of minutes in your groups, have a chat about that, and then we'll look at some of the things you can do to make it work for you.
70-20-10.
Okay, we just want to finish off the point that you're on. Now look, Chaz flirting with all the ladies to get his score. Seriously, this is just... He does a lot of stuff on influencing as well, you can probably tell that. Building rapport, yeah. Okay. So yeah, actually he does. Don't look into his eyes at all. So, first of all we'll do a vote, and then we'll have a little bit of feedback on what seems to be some of the things, note up some of the issues, and then we'll look at actually what you can do to take the best of the models but avoid making your learning truly a numbers game. So we're going to vote 70-20-10, 3-33, or something that's totally different, or a mixture of stuff. So who thinks 70-20-10 is the answer to all their problems now? Okay, go with that. Okay.
Gone up there with her.
Who thinks 3-33 is a really good way of doing it? Oh dear. Oh dear. Who thinks then that there's another way or a better way of doing things that's a mixture of things? Okay, so let's get some input from you. What is it that you think is good that we can take from either of the other 2 models?
If I may just interject.
Yes.
This gentleman here had an absolute gleamer of an idea earlier on.
I've gotten it now.
What was your idea, sir?
Well, it's very much down to the individual, so maybe the ratios are irrelevant for this.
Yeah, and actually, thank you so much for that, because our next slide is actually there's really only one number that matters, and it's the number 1. And it is about each person, about each role. Everyone will have different ways of learning, so absolutely. I think the conversation around having informal, formal and social learning is important, but it's actually about you looking at, so my new customer service rep, what do they need, what's going to work for them, what are the different ways we can do things. My new middle manager that's come in from outside of the organisation, they've got management skills but they don't know us, they don't know our culture, what do we need from that point of view? So it's about looking at the individual, but to do that you need to have something in place of these. So We were having a conversation about the fact that some people get hung up on oh, I've only got 25% of this, I need to have 70% of the experiential, how am I going to do that? Don't. Really don't. It's not about having, and in fact, actually, with due respect to the 70-20-10 model, it was never meant to be prescriptive. It was never meant to be, you must have this, you must have this, and you must have that. If you don't have that, it's wrong. It's saying this is how people have tended to learn for this type of role. So what it's really about, have you heard the expression learnscape before? It's a term that's used quite a lot in informal learning. So it's about the idea of creating the right learnscape. So instead of a landscape, so we've actually got a variety of things on the horizon that can appeal to different learning styles, different needs based on the person, based on the role, based on their experience. So it's about ensuring that you have got great information that people can easily access and they know how to access it. You can have the best knowledge management system ever, but if it's sitting on some computer and no one ever looks at it, it's not going to really be very useful. You can have some really great experienced people who would be wonderful mentors, but if you never mobilise them, then you won't do that. You can have great experts in different areas, but if you don't get communities of practice and learn from that, you're not going to do anything about it. Personally, I would say that yes, there's always things we can do to improve formal training. And actually, to be honest, for me, when we look at our fusion learning, our second pearl here is about learning being a process, not an event. So actually, for me, it's about bringing all of this together. It's not saying, when you've done that, you've learnt. It's about having some work before, to prepare someone before they go on any learning intervention, whether that is work shadowing, or going on a course, or doing an e-learning program. You need to have something back in the workplace afterwards to make sure they get the chance to practice. Because that's how we learn. We talked about trial and error right at the beginning, didn't we? That's how people learn, is by trial and error. So it's really about creating that learnscape that people can look at their different ways of doing things. Now, what are some of the challenges? I'll get Chaz to do a bit of scribing now. So what are some of the challenges that you think you've got with whether it's 70-20-10, 3-33, or generally that wider model? What are some of the issues or challenges you have in implementing that in your organisation? Or is it all wonderful and we don't have any problems?
You would be able to see what they're actually doing on the job.
Okay, so you can't see what they're actually doing on the job. So in terms of, is that when they're just learning on the job? Okay. So anyone else had that sort of issue with people? We're not sure what they're learning, how they're learning? So I guess my answer to that is in terms of upskilling some people who might potentially be their mentors. So for some customers we've had like new starter buddies. So someone who's in the organisation who's experienced in that role, that can, you know that they've got it, and give them some skills as a mentor. It's quite a good way for an experienced person who maybe isn't going to go up the tree, because with our flatter hierarchies these days, but actually being a mentor to a new person can enrich them and then actually develop some new skills for them. So having some sort of mentoring, not necessarily just senior managers, but from people at some of the grassroots level that you know they've got the skills and they're the people that you know do the job. And for me, it probably then comes back to you need to have some form of assessment to then see. And if that could be as simple as they're doing the job they need to do, they're not getting any rejects or any queries about things, or it could be you have a formal check at some point. But doing it that way is one way that you can actually sort of assess to some degree the quality of stuff that's been done on the job. Any other queries particularly we've got around 70-20-10?
It's the whole idea that learning is a course, isn't it? It's a culture.
Exactly, yeah. So it's the whole idea that learning is a course, and it's a culture. And actually, if you haven't taken any of the flyers on our Fusion Learning, I would recommend that, because for us it's actually quite important that it is. Learning is absolutely a process, not an event. And it comes at actually needing to change things at a much more cultural level. And actually, for me, one of the big things is the line managers. I really do. I don't know about you, but when I've worked in organisations and for organisations, one of the biggest challenges is your line manager saying, oh yes, but I don't do training, that's L&D's job or HR's job. My job is to make sure they do their job properly. Yeah, but if they know what they're doing, then they'll do their job better. Session we're running a bit later on this afternoon, about 2:30, is about engaging line managers. So it's about getting them to see why is it they don't engage, how can you engage them in things. So that might be an interesting thing to look at from that point of view. But really good tip I found recently was actually tell them the benefits from their point of view. So when people sell learning to line managers quite often, it's about how is it going to be good for the organisation? But I don't care about that. I'm a really busy manager. I've got 3 million things to do. I've got 20 meetings to go to every day. I haven't got time to do that. Do I really care if we're going to make that much more profit as an organisation? It's kind of make sense of it in their world. What are their problems? You're nodding. We've obviously had that one. I think you should come this afternoon for the other session. But it's that making sense of it in their world, acknowledging what their problems are. And to be honest, it's giving them the skills. How many of you have been line managers at some point in your career? You had to manage other people. How many of you got into that role and suddenly they expected there to be a magic wand and you suddenly knew how to train people, how to manage performance, how to set objectives? And how many of you actually had any training? Okay, that's quite one person. There you go. We're back to number one again. So that's a really big thing. It's actually how can you expect line managers to be engaged with something they know nothing about? So for me, it's really about that getting that level at that point, getting that support for your line managers. And coming back to the social stuff, creating a network for your line managers. It's a really important thing. And with today's digital world, they don't have to physically be in the same place. If you've got people that are diverse, they can do social networking. We do it all the time with Facebook and Twitter. Why don't we do it at work? Actually have ways that people can do it. They can have a forum saying, I've got a challenge, anyone got any ideas? You can formalise that into face-to-face things with action learning sets. I'm a firm believer in that. You learn more from other people. A guy who used to run an organisation called the Best Practice Club once said to me, I don't believe any person or organisation has got a problem that someone else hasn't already solved. So actually, if you can speak to other people, one, it's just good to know that it's not just you. But secondly, they can give you some ideas that you might not have thought about things. Any other key challenges and things that we've got about integrating that kind of model in what you do? In which case, I've said there when we talked about 333, it was very much about the idea of it being pervasive learning, about it being use the informal, social and formal side of doing things. But really those three words for me, collaborative, continuous and community-based. That kind of really sums it up for me, what it's all about. And that's where the fusion learning model that we have, and again there's information on that, you can take that with you, it's something you can use yourself. It is about that, being clear on what we are intending to do. So not, oh, I'm going to send you on a time management course. Why am I doing that? What is it the organisation needs? What is it the individual needs? Then looking, as we've talked about already, learning being a process, not an event. It's not going on a training course. It's about people taking it as and when they need it. It's about maximising natural learning, so that informal stuff and the social stuff, I think personally, is the one that most organisations struggle with. The informal stuff, we're getting more of that, but that social, that networking, that collaborating, because people are so busy, we don't seem to take the time for them to find ways to mix. Less is more. One of my biggest challenges as someone when I'm dealing with clients, I'm just getting them on this training course, so while they're there, can you get them to do this, this and this as well? And what happens with that is therefore they have loads of content and no chance for repetition or for practice, so they don't actually learn, they just get loads of facts thrown at them. Message before medium, and this is where sometimes the 70-20-10 issue is a bit of a problem because everyone's getting caught up on I haven't got any e-learning, I need to put some e-learning in. Or actually, hang on a second, I haven't got any of this, I need to put that in. The important thing is coming back to the person, what's the message, what's the learning they need? And the final two, which when you take it up a level, is learning is everyone's responsibility. It's not just the L&D team, it's not just the line managers, it's actually every individual. So it's getting that culture where people want to learn and develop themselves as individuals. And that probably comes back to a session that Chaz is going to run a little bit around getting people to link back to their purposeful passion. So that idea of what is my core passion, what my core purpose, what am I here for, and how can I be passionate about my job? And then ultimately creating that culture where it's all about learning. It's all about everyone learning. And in this fast-paced world, have any of you heard of the expression VUCA before? VUCA, so a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. That's the kind of world that we live in at the moment. So there's always different things going on. So as an organisation, to survive and thrive, you need to be agile, which means your people need to be agile, which means that you need to learn. So it's about getting that culture through the organisation, which needs to come top down and bottom up. Anybody got any questions or queries about any of the aspects of things that we've talked about so far this morning? So what I'd just like to say, if anyone wants to talk about any of the aspects of this, then please stay behind and have a chat to Chaz or myself. I think in essence for us, It's about the number one, but if you want to have two numbers, it's 7 to 1. So it's your 7 pearls and applying those to each individual person, and recognising you are looking at informal, social, and the formal learning. But it's about, let's make it right for the person. Let's not get stuck to, I must have this amount. What's right at that point? And let's get people involved at all levels. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.